So, tell me something terrible. I just thought of a really bad joke to start the podcast. Do you want to use it?
Sure.
Okay.
Worse than that one?
That wasn't a joke. That was a statement. No, it goes like this. Do you got that thing pulled up like mom yoga pants? No.
All the way up to my bra line.
Yeah. I meant your podcast episode.
I do.
Look at you go.
Yep. I am prepared.
Okay. And you said this one was hella long.
It's not hella long. It's just shy of 4 pages. It's
Okay.
not like Dyatlov Pass or the
Correct.
very first deep dive we did. That was
So this will either
very
be
long.
part 1 of 2 or
We'll just plow through it.
the beginning of a above average length podcast.
Yep.
To be determined.
Yep.
Okay.
Make the jokes heavy at the beginning.
You've approached me not with a topic, but with
3 days
you've
worth
been
of
upset,
upsetness.
yes, the entire time writing this. So I'm like, cool. Let's have a very fun podcast.
I knew of this story because I've heard short tellings of it before, but
Yeah.
until you actually like get into it, you're like, oh my God, there's so much more.
We've had a pretty good little influx the last week or so of like new listeners, like binging episodes and stuff. So it's good that you're like, oh, good, we got some fresh ears. Let's ruin it.
Yep.
Let's ruin them.
Yes.
Although if they're here, if you've listened, like there's people like that'll listen to like half a dozen episodes in a day.
Yeah.
You're ruined already. Like
Oh,
you're,
yes.
you're in
Also,
a-
you got through like the cringiest part of it where we were like, that was so cool because we were drinking regularly, and now I don't drink when we do this nearly as much, and like less cringy, and
yeah, no, there's like
developed a cadence now.
there's like half a dozen episodes where I was so wine drunk that I was just like half asleep.
Yeah.
So try to avoid that. I still love wine drunk. I try not to do it on the podcast.
No.
It's not great. The energy level's a little weak, but we'll see.
Can you power through this one though?
I got these sweet high noons and these, I hate LeBron James, but I tried his chips and they're just okay.
They're just okay. Well,
Yeah.
don't make too much.
They're me
You're
crinkling
affecting the
my
audio.
bag.
Yeah.
They're flaming hot cheddar and sour cream, which I get behind the idea, but they're just okay.
You can tell he's from the Midwest. That sour and cream potato chip. They're a staple.
From Akron.
Yep. Oh, hi, I'm Tiffany.
Hi, I'm Scott.
And you're listening to Tell Me Something Terrible.
Yeah, you are.
Okay.
I made a really... I didn't tell you this. This was during golf tonight.
Okay.
Did you have something you're about to say?
No.
You raised your hands like you were
I'm
going to make a
stretching.
point. Okay, good. So I was golfing with these two gentlemen tonight.
Older gentleman.
Yes, my dad and I, we're in a golf league. We're old as fuck.
Scott's not old. He's old
I
at
am
heart.
proficient in any sport a 50-year-old is proficient in, essentially. But we were golfing these two guys. My dad, what's my dad now? 67?
Old.
No, I'm good at math. 66. He'll be 67 this year. These two guys we were golfing one was my dad's ish age and one's older than my dad. He's in his 70s. So the guy that's in his mid 60s, he's a former hippie. He's one of my favorite people in the league.
Love it. What's his name?
Doug. And I won't say his last name.
No, that's rude.
But they're both like 6'2". And they're old. You don't see old dudes that are tall. Most of them are dead by now.
It gets a little bit harder to get that blood down from their
That's
toes
fine.
and back up.
Yeah, no, that's what us short guys, we're taller because you guys are 6 feet under.
And
by the
we
time
learned
get
from
to there.
Allie Ward this week that short men underneath the height of 5'9" have more sex.
Have a higher coital rate, as she said, which is a better way. Anyway, so there's these two super tall, because I'm short, super tall old guys, which is always fun. Anyway, one's a former hippie. He worked at Daimler Chrysler or whatever. He drives an electric car.
Great.
He's one of my favorite people in the league. Anyway, he said something offhandishly about I'm going to make a very short podcast and call it, because we were like in the back nine and we were like out in the woods.
In his
He's
60s.
like,
Sir, they intend to start out at 25 minutes, but I promise you they never are that
but
short.
no, he's like, I'm going to start a short podcast called Mosquito Bites. I was like, I've already heard that podcast sucks. And he looked at me, he's like, he's like, you'll be my first guest because you nailed it on the first try. I was like, I do have a podcast. He's like, really?
Did you? Oh, you actually told him you had one?
Yeah.
You had to shamelessly plug it in front of somebody when you weren't the one that brought it up?
Correct.
That's awesome.
But he's also like a mid-60s dude.
Right.
Who at least is aware of podcasts. And he's a former hippie, so I feel like he probably listens to podcast. But anyway, I got to talk about podcasts and make a horrible joke, which ties in perfectly with his podcast, while golfing at a podunky golf course where we live.
In the Midwest.
Yep.
How cool.
And after that hole where I made that horrible joke, I finished par, birdie, par for like the best 3-hole stretch of my year so far.
Just
so
really feeling yourself.
I just
in that
relaxed and I played well.
You had to confess in front of your father that you're a podcaster now.
Oh, my dad is... People that are hard of hearing can hear twice as good as my dad. And he has hearing aids. He can't hear shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I swear on the golf course and he's never heard me swear. Because I know if he's more than 8 feet away.
Do you think that one time that he said fuck in front of you when you were 26, he might not, he just thought maybe he said it quietly enough that maybe you didn't hear?
No, he was in a bad place in his life too. But no, I will hit a ball and I'll be like, fucking Jesus Christ. And I know he can't hear me because he's like 12 feet from me.
Also, it makes me laugh every single time that you say that because I'm a child and you're this like nice, sweet person and usually like quiet, and then just every once in a while it just flies out and you're like, yes.
Golf is the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. It's an emotional roller coaster every time out.
Says a bad golfer.
Says a guy who shot 11 strokes better today than he did a week ago because I don't practice golf. I don't have time for that shit.
Have we meandered down a path that's lighthearted enough?
You said this was so long. I was like, let's drag out the first 10 minutes about nonsense.
And shamelessly plugging not virtually, which is pretty exciting.
Shout out Doug.
Yeah.
And your white ponytail. Used to be. Now it's like ear length, but he had a white ponytail.
Of course he did.
Yes. And he's a lefty.
Oh.
Shout out lefty golfers. Because Jamie's listening. I know Jamie's listening. And Jamie is a lefty. I don't know if he'd call himself a golfer. He has golfed, but...
No, so have I.
Anyway.
So...
You're like, so have I.
So last month we didn't start Pride Month with a Pride story. I didn't know if I was going to do it. And I decided, you know what, fuck it. We'll do it. Tradition. Last year we did Stonewall. This year we're going to cover...
That was a year ago we did Stonewall?
Yes.
And not Stonewall Jackson. Go back and listen. I say that like I know who the fuck Stonewall Jackson is.
We've had this discussion. He didn't.
No. Yeah, it's like, I know where Stonewall Road is.
There's the Stonewall in Jackson? No,
Whoa, I never
president.
put 2 and 2 together.
Oh, no.
That there's a Stonewall in Jackson. There is literally a
Stonewall on Stonewall in Jackson.
Yes, and I just now... Okay, anyway... As you were saying,
Epiphanies.
You had an intro plan.
So, we're going to talk about one of the United States' first openly gay men to hold a governing office.
You mentioned, is it Milk? Mm-hmm. Okay, I've never seen the movie.
Me neither.
Sean Penn, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And I heard it's amazing. There's a lot of there's musicals and documentaries and all different sorts of stuff.
Based on the story, I assume, not just the movie,
the
right?
story,
okay, yeah. The movie wasn't so good. They're like, let's make a musical about it.
No. So we're going to talk about his time in the government office, the impact his life on the LGBTQ movement, and his assassination.
Okay.
The San Francisco supervisor, which is a fancy word for...
spoiler alert.
Oh, yeah. I hope by now you know. A lot of people call it like just his murder. No, it was an assassination.
What has to be the difference? Is it if you have like a prominent like position?
Yes, I think where you are in society. So like somebody who's like super rich, like a Rockefeller would be assassinated, a president would be assassinated, a musician would be assassinated.
No, they'd be murdered. I feel like you have
somebody like John Lennon was assassinated.
Okay. I feel like you have to have political power to be an assassination.
Maybe technically, but I feel like John Lennon he was a big activist. I think because John Lennon was leaning into the activist roles and less just strictly musician role, that's when it becomes more of an assassination. Like he was a musician, he was also an activist.
Do you want to know the definition?
Yes.
Sorry,
more
the
vague
shitty
than
definition is the action of assassinating someone.
Oh, wow. Tell me more.
To murder a usually prominent person by sudden or secret attack, often for political reasons. Anyway.
All right, so John Lennon.
I mean, political can be political scope is quite wide. Anyway,
Yes.
back to
A
your
shame.
story.
Anyway.
Less Googling, more reading the 4 pages you wrote for this podcast.
Harvey Milk
Okay.
was born May 22nd, 1930.
Hey!
We have birthday.
What year?
1930.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know the visuals that I remember from the trailer were very 1970s-esque.
Yes,
so
this happened in like 78.
Okay.
Yep. So, he was born to a middle-class family in New York where he played football and sang the opera.
Okay.
Yep.
Those
And
are okay.
very opposing forces.
Slightly.
So after
I can
high
respect
school,
a Renaissance man.
yeah, well, and he tried to stay. He wasn't as obviously he wasn't out when he was in high school. He had very
In the late 40s, early 50s,
Yeah.
or whatever it was
Yep.
at that point.
So after high school, he went on to New York State College for Teachers, joined the Navy, and serving as a diving instructor during the Korean War, where he was later discharged in 1955 with an, quote, other than honorable discharge.
Okay. Did he get outed?
Yeah, he
Okay.
got caught. Yep.
Okay, so they don't call it dishonorable discharge, huh? I wouldn't have known in the 70s.
the article, they just said other than honorable, which is a euphemism for
It's that gray area.
Yeah. So he then bounced around different jobs in New York while he befriended what was referred to in one article as the, quote, gay radicals.
Befriended the gay radicals. The gays.
Yeah, they're called activists for basic human rights, but, whatever. And started to chill in Greenwich Village.
Okay.
Yep. Full
Is
circle.
that where Stonewall happened?
Yes.
Look at me go.
So this
it
is where
Greenwich or Greenwich?
Greenwich. It is Greenwich. I fucking did that last time too. And I know I've heard it 1,000 times, but
Yeah.
it's just the village. He started hanging out in the village where he started to live a more open life.
Yep.
Eventually, he made his way to San Francisco in the mid-'70s and opened a camera shop in the city's up-and-coming gay community, the Castro District.
Okay.
So he became a mainstay in the
That
culture.
seems like a very pleasant life. Running a camera shop in the 70s,
Yeah.
just developing film, selling people little
and
cool, clicky
but he
cameras.
also became part of like a mainstay in the culture and the community. Like he became a hub for people to come and plan,
Yeah.
like safety. So he started becoming a really prominent figure in the LGBT community,
not just a shop owner.
right.
Okay.
So he helped shape Castro District into a thriving business community that people wanted to live in, and then decided to take up a career in politics. So Harvey lost his first 2 elections as city supervisor, which is essentially like it's a fancy word for a city council.
Okay. Like one step below, like mayor, essentially.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So, but the election process for district seats was changing when a more liberal mayor named George Moscone was elected.
Okay.
Moscone's goal was to create a more inclusive, diverse San Francisco, abolishing the city's anti-sodomy laws.
It's a good step.
Yeah. And so
Sorry, I was eating a little bron chip.
and also I think sodomy laws would affect straight couples as well. People just don't talk about that back then.
Yeah, you have got options.
Yeah. Just slipping that in there. So the district seats, like I said, were no longer voted in. They were appointed by the mayor.
Okay.
So
Hand selected. That's it's a slippery slope if you got a shit mayor.
yeah, I mean, you still ran for it. You would still run for your seat, but like you would just people in the community would be like, "That's the guy," and you'd have like a handful of people who'd be like, "Okay, well, this guy is clearly the guy." Like he tried to be fair about it because
Okay.
he did appoint other people that weren't just gay and lesbians on the board.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Sorry, your synopsis of politics.
I know it's like
you
you
should
said,
run, and they're like,
a
"That's the guy," so
fair-
I picked that guy because that's the guy.
Well, I mean, like a fair,
Yeah, no.
a fair mayor, like you said, who wasn't like corrupt, would be like taking into their
Yeah.
communities.
Luckily, he left
consideration.
New York and moved to California.
So
That's helps a little in
it
this
does.
regard.
So Moscone set out to have a more diverse board.
Moscone just makes you want Italian food.
Right. So he appointed several gay and lesbian chairs, one of which was Harvey Milk.
Sorry.
Heads of chairs. They're called chair people.
Yes.
Chairs.
I was just like, what does a lesbian chair look like?
Very rainbow.
Yeah.
Every
No.
color.
No, it's probably just black.
He has
probably
a
just-
notched eyebrow.
No, it's probably just black.
Just
Yeah. It just wears black.
all the time.
Yeah. It's got a plaid throw pillow. Yeah.
Yes.
Spice it up.
Yep.
Yeah.
And some white strings with like a little star on it like for chucks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do
It's a
lesbians
little
wear
white
chucks?
No, it's not really Chuck so much as like Doc Martens, right? That's the stereotype.
I don't know. Anyway,
we have enough people in our lives. We should just ask. Please, let's just keep wandering down this and just offend as many people as possible.
not offend. I was like I said, every gay person who just wears essentially dark colors all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's also like a hide thing.
Yes.
Yeah. So, Harvey had been focusing his political campaign on equal rights for the LGBTQ community, Black people, and other minority communities, as well as free school lunches, legalizing abortion, and these were all the same points that Moscone was running his campaign as well. So the two were peas in a pod.
Okay. What was Moscone's first name?
George.
George. Okay.
Yep. So of course,
just in case you switch, so I can.
I tried to keep it pretty consistent.
Okay.
So, of course, there are two sides to every coin. Supervisor Dan White, who is a staunch conservative representing the
His name is literally White.
Yeah. Yep. He's a good Christian man who would go to chapel every Sunday. So he's a staunch conservative representing the primarily middle class, which is a nearly all white the 8th district.
Okay.
Very monogamous. These are your stereotypical,
Yeah.
Nuclear family.
It's the little chunk of the Midwest in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So White, who was actually had a decent working friendship with Harvey, they would meet every Thursday for coffee.
Okay.
So Dan White was a Vietnam vet, a war that Harvey was against, as was obviously a ton of people.
But he's still Korean War. He was.
Yeah, he was in Korean War. Okay. And there's a difference between like joining because you didn't really have a choice.
Yeah.
He got kicked out because he was outed. Yeah. So Dan White was also a former police officer turned firefighter.
Just a life in service.
So White believed that the city was, of course, headed in the wrong direction.
He had a flat top too.
No, because it was the 70s. He had like a middle part and sandy brown hair and like no facial hair.
No facial. I was gonna say definitely shaved every fucking morning.
Yep.
In his white t-shirt.
Yep.
Before he put on his whatever button up he had.
Brown, because it's the like late 70s. Everything is brown corduroy and like a red tie, like muted red rust color tie.
Not pink.
Not pink.
No. Never pink.
So White believed that the city was, of course, headed in the wrong direction and sided with Republican Senator John Briggs. Both were pushing for a law under the guise of the Save Our Children movement. Sound familiar?
Did they want to charge for free lunches?
No. They wanted to ban any outed gay person from becoming a teacher because child molestation.
Huh? Okay. Anyway, no, I'll just move on past that.
Well, don't you know? That's the thing. There's been the fear-mongering since, like, the 50s, that if you let gay people around your kids, they're going to molest them and turn them into other gay people, and then they're going to die.
Okay. Good.
Remember when we talked about the when we talked about the PSAs last year?
I hope that was predominantly Catholic people. Anyway, as you were speaking.
So
I'm glad we're not doing a visual podcast for this one because there's just
our eyes just keep getting really big and passive aggressive at each other.
Yeah.
So naturally, Moscone and Milk pushed back against this legislation, trying to push through anti-discrimination laws in the workplace and businesses, in addition to desegregating the police force because that still hadn't been desegregated yet.
God. Less than 50 years ago?
Yeah. And San Francisco was very much not the more progressive city that it is today. Like, these guys are literally being dropped into a shark, like, infested water where the city's dividing and people are coming in and changing and there's a huge pushback. I'm glad we got over that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So the anti-LGBTQ legislation failed, and this is when Dan White decided that he was going to resign from the board.
Okay.
So you see, he just couldn't support his family on the meager $9,200 yearly salary provided to cities.
$9,200 or $1,000?
$9,200 a year.
Okay.
Which in today's money is about $44,000. Couldn't support his family on it.
Okay.
If
he's got a family, yeah, I get that.
Yeah, $44,000. That would be fucking hard.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's twice minimum wage.
But
anyway.
But also back then, how much college debt do you think he had? Like, you're not also taking into consideration $44,000 is hard for us now, but people our age have a ridiculously higher debt to income ratio than people back then did.
If he's a veteran and a former public. Like,
he's getting all his bills.
He at least has benefits. Paid.
Yes.
Like, anyway.
Well, I mean, the benefits really aren't as good as they should be, but he has. Yeah. So he couldn't.
If you said 9,200, like even if that's 44 today, I get like
that's all. Yeah.
If it was 90, because I know sometimes you get your hundreds and your thousands mixed up.
No, 9200.
92,000. Then I would have been like, he's fine. Like, stop.
No.
Yeah, that's six figures easy this nowadays.
It was hard money, but he just happened to resign after his bill didn't pass.
Oh.
Yep.
Gracious loser.
Yep. So he had a mortgage.
That's another trend.
So he had to mortgage his home and open a business with his wife selling baked potatoes on the side.
What? That is not the direction I thought this was going. Who the fuck can't make? You can literally make a baked potato in the fucking microwave. Why do you have to have a side hustle of selling baked potatoes?
I don't know if they had like a little food cart or like, it is the city, like little like how you got hot dog carts except with baked potatoes instead.
What?
Look, that shit, that would be legit in the Midwest. If you had like when you do the little food court stuff, no, people would love baked potato. Like, you used to have like people going around selling like tacos out of the back of their cars. Someone would do that with baked potatoes, you'd be all about it.
But if your like target market is selling essentially what is already poor people food, like
you want to make a hot dog restaurant, so you better be careful where you're going.
Yeah, because we don't live in fucking San Francisco. There's a big difference there. And anyway. I guess the profit margins would be decent if you can sell them for a good price. So, good business model.
So he mortgaged his home to open a potato cart.
If they're not putting pulled pork in a baked potato, I don't even want to talk. No. Because that's where you got to start. That's got to be your signature item. And then we can go from there.
Okay.
I mean, literally, maybe this is where Wendy's came from. I don't know. Dan White becomes Dave Thomas. He's square burgers. He's not cutting corners.
No, Dave Thomas is a good guy. So he asked, so Dan White opened his potato business. Was like, I can't do this. Yeah. So he asked Moscone to resign.
It's literally called white potatoes. Anyway.
We don't have those Yukon Golds. White potatoes only.
Yes. We're segregated too because I'm a dick. I mean a Dan. Anyway.
So you are feisty tonight.
I told you these are high noons. I'm ready to go.
So
you said this is going to be bad. You said get the jokes up front. We're 20 minutes in. I'm joked out.
Okay.
I'm just going to eat these shitty LeBron chips and drink my high noons. So go ahead.
So Dan asked Moscone if he could resign from his post, and this wound up opening up the opportunity to swing the city board in favor of Moscone. Because up until this point, the board had been pretty split, with Dan White being the deciding vote more often than not, which slowed a lot of progress and legislation from being passed because he was usually against Moscone's policies.
Yeah.
American politics, guys. Mm-hmm. So this upset the San Francisco police force, who had backed White's political campaign.
Shocker.
So a week later, after I'm assuming some heavy discussions took place with some of his cop friends, allegedly.
Potentially.
Dan approached Moscone regarding reinstating his position as city supervisor. Mm-hmm. But of course, Moscone had been considering other qualified candidates.
What about... We found some guys that aren't out selling potatoes, Dan. Anyway.
That was his thing, too. That was why he decided to... That was his thing when I was watching this sad, sappy interview with Dan where he was like, it's just not fair for me to continue to be a good, supervisor because my attention is split elsewhere and I have to do this and I'm so stressed out at home and like I have another business I have to run, so I can't be out in public because I can't make my bills meet and my marriage is like starting to fall apart. And so you guys don't deserve a city supervisor like me
who's so distracted.
And then asked for his job back.
I mean, I've cooked some baked potatoes. They take way longer than you expect. It's like an hour in that fucking oven.
They really do. And if you're doing one potato at a time. So on November 26th, do what? You okay?
November 26th.
Oh, yeah. No, we've all the birthdays.
Yeah.
So November 26th, 1978, White was tipped off by a reporter that he might not be reinstated back to the board and that Moscone would be announcing a new member the next day at 2 p.m. So White woke up the next morning on November 27th, called his aide to pick him up and take him to City Hall. Yeah.
Drive yourself, Dan.
Yeah. When White got in the car, he had a .38 Smith & Wesson attached to his belt. It's a pistol.
Okay, yeah, I'm aware.
Yep. Fully loaded with 5 rounds, and 10 additional rounds filled his pockets.
Okay. He's got a 15 people list.
We're going to get to it.
Oh,
So they arrived at City Hall. White managed to bypass the metal detectors by crawling through an open window on the first floor.
Okay.
Where he proceeded to find Moscone. So once he found him, he started yelling at him. To defuse the situation, Moscone invited White into a private office for a drink and a chat. Witnesses recall hearing yelling coming from behind the closed door. White pulled out his pistol and shot Moscone twice. Once Moscone fell to the floor, White proceeded to shoot him 2 more times in the head, just for good measure.
Okay. Seems excessive.
Yeah. White then left Moscone's office, turned down the hall, and spotted one of Harvey Milk's aides, and thought that was where he should head next. So he loaded his gun, because he'd emptied 4 out of the 5 into someone else. And he turned around and headed to the city supervisor's offices. So the offices were mostly empty. Harvey and the lead supervisor, Diane Feinstein. No, nothing.
What?
Diane Feinstein.
What?
She's an active senator.
Okay.
Okay.
You think I fucking know who she is? Yeah.
Anyway, they were in their offices.
I was like, do I know that name?
Kind of. It's part of the, like, you get names thrown at you and you're like, that person sounds familiar. No, nothing.
No.
All right.
Nope.
Cool. Love you.
I'm so politically savvy.
So the offices were mostly empty except for Harvey and Diane. And Diane tried to get White's attention in an attempt to inform him that of that afternoon's like new chair appointment. Is like let him know, like, oh my gosh, like if you haven't heard yet, because later on, Dan will claim that Moscone didn't try to tell him that was the plan, even though there's proof that Moscone tried to call him. He just couldn't get through to him.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know what the plan is. You go
to replace him. He's not.
Okay.
He was going to let him know you're not getting your seat back. I'm going to announce this person at
I just
2
wanted to
next day.
clarify that.
Yep. Not the plan. He's not like, oh, come murder me. No, that's not a thing.
I understood that.
Yep. So she was trying to get his attention to let him know that was going to happen, not knowing that Moscone was laying down the hall bleeding out. So White walked up to Harvey and asked him to join him in his office. Diane said that White looked so pale and stressed that when she heard yelling and then she heard the first shot, she was convinced that White had killed himself.
Oh, okay.
Yep. And then there were 4 more shots.
That's a lot for a dead guy to shoot.
So White had emptied his revolver. He shot Harvey thrice and then an additional 2 times in his head as well.
Goodness. Okay.
So after White walked out of the office, Diane was in shock. She rushed to Harvey to check for a pulse and put her finger in a bullet hole in his wrist instead. So she knew he was dead.
Okay. That's a weird place to shoot a guy.
Yeah.
In his wrist?
Yep. Yeah, he just got shot.
I mean,
he was probably
him
just
3
firing.
times.
Yeah. So she tried to call the police at this point, but couldn't get through because I'm sure there were probably people calling about.
Yeah, where they heard all the
Moscone.
gunshots from. Yeah.
Yep. And then she learned about Moscone. And because she was next in succession, Diane was now the acting mayor of San Francisco. Within 1.5 hours of the assassinations, Diane announced to a city that both Mayor Moscone and Supervisor Harvey Milk were shot, and the lead suspect was Dan White. She had watched it fucking happen and then had to go on live television and do a press conference.
The lead suspect.
As the brand new mayor being like, I know this for sure. Like in the documentary, it like opened with that clip, and I was like, well, hopefully she's right about that. And then I was watching the documentary. I was like, oh, she's pretty certain.
Yep. She was the last person to see both of them go into a room, and one of them came out. Yeah.
So this immediately sparked questions within the residences of San Francisco about gun control and mental health.
It's probably a good place to start.
In the 70s. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
We're doing so good.
So good.
So in the meantime, Dan had managed to walk out of City Hall to a nearby payphone where he called his wife and, quote, said a 4-letter word.
Okay. Darn.
And told her to meet him at the nearby chapel.
Okay.
Because he's Catholic.
Is he, okay. Can you call, what do they call that? Like
the priest?
No, when you are there.
Sanctuary?
Can you still do that?
I think there might be a line that gets drawn. I think
What's
this
the
might
thing
be
they
it.
call in Pirates of the Caribbean or Caribbean?
Parlay.
Parlay. Yeah.
Yes, I need to parlay with the police force,
Yes.
please.
Yeah.
Send one in. You
Yep.
can't take me out because I'm.
Oh, she called parlay. Yeah.
So, so this is where he confessed to her what he had done, that his head had been hurting him lately, and that there was just too much pressure and not enough time to tell her how he'd been feeling. So they walked to the police station.
Not enough potatoes in the day, lady.
So they walked to the police station, and White turned himself in.
Okay.
While he was under 24-hour surveillance and suicide watch, getting checked on every 15 minutes out of fear that he may hurt himself, there was a gathering of people growing into a 50,000-strong crowd holding a candlelight vigil. And this is where the masses...
Not for Dan.
No.
Okay, good.
For Harvey and Moscone. Yep. So this is where the masses were able to listen to Harvey's last words in his own voice because he had recorded 3 different living wills within days of earning his seat as supervisor, knowing that he would be a potential target for assassination. And they played part of those tapes at this vigil.
That's unfortunate foreshadowing.
So one quote, after ruminating about the chances of people in his position being murdered for basic human rights,
Yeah.
it goes, I cannot prevent anybody from getting angry, mad, or frustrated. I can only hope that they'll turn anger and frustration and madness into something positive. And I hope that 5, 10,000 people rise. So his words helped fuel the LGBTQ movement because in that moment, like Diane even says, she's like, I thought it was done.
Yeah.
It was over. Nothing. It was done.
Yeah.
His words, his actions, his like activism, his career, just and the fact that he was murdered because of it, just it took off.
Yeah. Unfortunately brought it into the forefront.
Yes,
Yeah.
in a very bad way. And then there's also a quote later on. He was talking about how he had literally just gotten a letter from some kids in like fucking Pennsylvania who felt brave enough and secure enough to like come out. And he's like reading part of this letter, and then at the end of it, he's like, it's about giving young people hope.
Yeah.
And this is when I was like, just started sobbing on the couch. I was like, oh God, it's so
Yeah.
awful.
Yeah.
And then it was time for the murder trial. So White's lawyers tried to lean on what was later dubbed the Twinkie defense.
What? From like, what's the fucking movie where the guy's going for the Twinkies? Why can't I think of that? You can't think of
The zombie movie. Oh my gosh.
Zombieland.
Zombieland. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Is that the Twinkie defense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Those Twinkies.
Fucking
Yes.
ho-hos.
Yep.
Or whatever.
The snowballs.
Snowballs. Yeah, that's what it is.
I hate snowballs. So you see, poor little Danny White had been feeling so
I
depressed
like how
and
you've
stressed out.
demeaned him down to Danny.
Fuck him.
Yeah.
So he turned inward, sinking into a bout of depression because the city was being apart, becoming unsafe. The gay agenda!
Becoming the whitey-tighty that he is.
Yep. So he would sit or lay for hours on the couch, watching television, devouring high-carb, high-sugar foods. Like,
what does that the fuck have to...
Everything, apparently.
Just smashing...
That's why he's so depressed.
He's
and has
smashing kettle corn like a fucking fiend.
Yep.
Okay.
And just...
Doritos and Mountain Dew.
becoming more and more deranged because of, yes, the fully leaded Pepsi and Coke, the cupcakes and donuts and Twinkies. Just sitting there.
What?
Yes.
This is the dumbest fucking thing in the world. Was Dan White 436 pounds by now?
I just hold, it gets so much worse.
Does it?
I just can't. I just have to keep reading.
Okay.
So, his mental state was in complete ruins from the depression, and according to the psychiatrist that was called for the defense, that horrible sugary diet could permanently affect the cognitive functions of that all-American man.
Okay.
Just listen to his taped confessions from the to the police. Like, he's just sad. He's just sobbing. He's a broken man. 5 jury members, which were made up of 7 white middle-aged men and 5 white middle-aged women, even though the gay community was growing by the day, and the population of San Francisco consisted of 17% black minority.
Yep.
5 members of the jury cried while that confession tape was being played. In his tapes, he clearly was not in his right mind. Just listen to him cry and sob. He's obviously a broken man that would never murder anyone unless he really truly wasn't in his right mental state of mind. If he wasn't driven by a deep sense of betrayal and mental unwellness, because he was betrayed by Moscone and Harvey, who they say considered him friends.
Okay. And when he left a position willingly?
Yeah.
Okay.
He just snapped. He was a nice family guy.
He's just smashing Twinkies.
So he clearly didn't intend to kill Moscone.
Is this high carb diet potatoes? Anyway.
That's a high. Well, I guess there's. I was corrected you like you don't know what the fuck's in a potato. So he clearly didn't intend to kill Moscone or Milk. He just wanted to talk, even though he had brought a loaded gun with additional ammo with him. Intentionally avoided the metal detectors by crawling through a window.
Yep.
Which he was caught doing, by the way, by a security guard that he'd lied to, telling the guard that, like, oh, I'm Dan, I'm a supervisor, I just left my key, my aide went in and to get it, and they forgot. And so he was just crawling through the window to get to his office.
Okay. Security guard's probably questioning a lot of things right now. Not right now, but then.
Yes. So the sentencing for the crimes could potentially earn White a stay in San Quentin, followed by the death penalty.
All seems fine.
So it took less than 2
None of
hours.
which is going to happen.
Nope. It took less than 2 hours deliberation.
Okay.
The jury came back with 2 counts of voluntary manslaughter.
Okay. I don't know what the sentencing is for that, but I don't think it's San Quentin or death penalty.
Oh, no. It's a maximum of 7 years and 8 months in prison.
Okay. So he's out now.
Outside the courthouse, when the verdict was announced, a second crowd started growing. 300 people marched noisily but calmly, mostly orderly, to City Hall. There was not a lot of chaos yet.
Okay.
No one tried to stop them. The police even stopped traffic to make for the impromptu protest. Most likely, in my opinion, they were probably pissed off at White because they and they were like, "Fuck it, who cares?" Since they paid for his campaign and all, allegedly. So the crowd. My statement is allegedly. They have proof that they backed his campaign. The fact that they backed his campaign is not the alleged part. Yes. The probable corruption is me, being like, hey, maybe we should have looked into this more.
Yeah.
So the crowd swells to 5,000 people asking for Dan White's head. The anger burst through the calm, even with people within the crowd yelling to keep the violence down. So it broke out into an all-out riot that lasted until 2 a.m.
They're all hopped up on carbs and sugar. What do you expect?
They're clearly not in their right mind, those Twinkies.
They've been smashing Twinkies for days.
And so this night became known as the White Night Riots. Police managed to reroute the mob from the city hall, but all that did was stir up looting and fires in the surrounding parts of the city. Funnily enough, no one was arrested. So by the end of it, there were 63 cops that had been injured, and I've read somewhere between 40 to 170 people that were injured.
Okay.
So the police decided that they were just going to get even. So the next day, they took it all out on the residents of the Castro district, which just widened the divide in the city.
Naturally.
So 5 years later, Dan White was paroled for his crimes.
Okay, 2 blatant murders, premeditated.
Because the jury thinks that he was just broken and he's not a murderer. He was just so
Guess
stressed.
what? 5 years later, he's probably still broken then.
Yeah, especially coming out of the United States prison system. Gets better. So Feinstein
Who's he kill next?
Feinstein sent him a letter informing him that it would be unsafe for him to come back to San Francisco because people were still out for blood. The city didn't take it well. Scars were still fresh.
Yeah.
So he laid low in L.A., but L.A. didn't want him either. People started protesting at his presence. So he packed up and headed back to a small neighborhood in San Francisco. 6 months later, White was found sitting in his car with a tube from his exhaust pipe running into the cab.
Okay.
He'd killed himself.
Okay.
Yep.
So he did kill someone next.
No, yeah, hold on.
Okay.
Years later, in 1998, the officer who took White's confession, who also happened to be a childhood friend, dropped a fun little tidbit of information regarding White's intent that day. White told him that he planned to kill more people that day, including another supervisor, a black man and friend to Harvey Milk named Willie Brown, and a woman named Ruth Silver. So White said to his friends...
Wait, White was going to kill Brown and Silver?
Yes.
Sorry, I couldn't let that go.
You were just getting every color of the rainbow out of the way here.
Yep.
So White said to his friend that day, "You know, Frank, I really lost it that day." And now the jury has to live with the fact that they sympathized with a bigot who had no problem murdering people who were different from him, and that he had no problem killing more.
Oh, he said that out loud?
Yeah,
Like
no,
that.
he said
So-
it to Frank. Like, I really lost it that day. He said it out loud.
But that part of the confession wasn't brought to the table.
No.
No.
Nope. And that's not as long as I was going to be because it was really hard to make jokes.
That's the whole thing?
Yeah, that's the whole thing.
Okay. 4 pages on there is not as bad as when you print it out.
No, I also feel like because I'm not drinking as much, I don't stumble through it. I'm not as slow. Like,
Well, that and,
I feel like we're getting better.
What would...
If I were to self-reflect on the past year.
Well, and like, yeah, there's not... Like, I was just going to let you read the story because, A, it's interesting. I was just listening. Like, I was
You
listening
thought
to
it was
the
going to be
podcast.
longer?
No, and I was like, well, what am I going to do? Craig, there's no good spot for jokes. Anyway.
No, that's why I said get them out early.
Yeah, no. That's, and I didn't know how far. Like I said, like I didn't know how far.
I could have
down.
included a lot more, but it just.
I was waiting.
I was
for you
getting
to say,
very frustrated.
I was waiting
done.
for you to say that they found out like later in 1998 that somebody confessed that they were the ones that like planted to make it look like a suicide or something. That I was waiting for.
Oh
you to go down
yeah, like a
nother-
murder. Yeah, like an avenge murder.
So he still did get the death
truly
sentence.
did. Yeah.
So.
Yep. He wound up killing himself. So. Oh no.
Well, you know.
Yeah. Yep.
I kind of want to watch the movie because I feel like I did miss out a little bit on like the impact that Harvey Milk had. Like,
and I think it's really important that people know these stories too. Like, yes, his death was tragic, but there was at least some, and I'm not saying it's justified. At least the movement didn't die. That he had inspired enough people before he was gone that didn't die with him.
Yeah, if his story and his
stupid
cause
because we're
died,
still
that would have
fucking
been...
fighting for literally everything today.
Yeah, if his story and his like purpose would have died, that'd be more sad, probably even to him, than if he happened to die.
There was an article that I read from NPR that was like 40 years later, and there were people being, acknowledging it, and then but someone had at the end they were musing because they were like, oh, there was this big thing where they dedicated an army boat to him, and then like the reporter was like, I don't think he'd appreciate that though because he got kicked out because of the don't ask, don't tell. Like, he's not going to be like
who he was.
Yeah, please, yes, name this boat after me when I got discharged from the army because I'm gay.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
Yeah,
you missed the mark by a mile.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, sources.
Okay.
That article that I just mentioned from NPR, named 40 years after the assassination of Harvey Milk, LGBTQ candidates find success. 40 years later. And then biography.com entry on Harvey Milk, a Britannica.com entry on Harvey Milk, and then the ABC 7 News documentary titled Murder at City Hall, The Killing of Mayor George Moscone and Supervisor Harvey Milk.
Okay.
And that's the episode.
Okay.
If you've made it this far.
Congrats. This one was heavier than usual, but not as heavy. Though you made it seem like it was going to be like dark on dark on dark. And like it is it's a shitty subject.
Yes.
And it's like, but like it's not like
it is awful that it happened, but there's still hope in the beginning of it. And I feel like someone who's this important to people that are this close to our lives, like it needed to be the first 2 pages needed to be highlighted about how much of a change and a difference in people's lives he was making. Yeah,
it's an important story to know. And like you see like the movie trailer and like it's better.
It's literally the MLK of like he's literally the MLK of the gay rights movement. Yeah. So. And nobody ever talks about it. You just know he was some gay...
And literally, you just know they made a movie about it.
Yeah. And that's it. So there was a lot of good quotes. I recommend watching that documentary. And we're going to go watch the movie now and try not to cry.
Go watch what movie?
Milk.
Right now?
Yep.
It better be streaming. It's like 11 o'clock at night, homie. Okay. All right. Thanks for listening.
Yes.
Well, see you guys next time.
Yes.
All right. What
am I doing next week? Oh, next week will be fiery and bloody.
Is that supposed to encourage people to come back? Yes. All right. I'm confused. Yes. Anyway. All right. Thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. Oof, that was terrible. Thanks for listening to our terrible podcast. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, or wherever you like to listen. Feel free to follow us on Twitter at TMSTPod.
And if you'd like to support the show, you can find us on Patreon at Tell Me Something Terrible.